into it, we have first the idealized research process and the different steps that it takes. You see some feedback loops here. I'll talk about them briefly after going through the different phases, but first, given by the color codes in this graphic, we have four main stages, each with two sub-stages. So first, we will have to determine in each research project what we do study and why we study it. That is not just which specific individuals, which units, which cases we study, but also which variables, what do we measure, how do we design the entire study, and so on, because we want to find out something, and this arch from a motivating idea to a specific research objective or problem is the first step. Then we look at, given what we want, what do we already know? So what has previous literature already tackled? Which theorizing tools do already exist? Do we even need to conduct another study, or can we conclude just based on the literature that we have? And given that we see a purpose in collecting additional data and contributing to the landscape of empirical studies, we do formulate specific hypotheses and research questions to guide our research. So this concludes this second part, and the first two parts are the more conceptual parts of the research that occur prior to any data collection and its specific planning, though you often already have in mind roughly what you want to do empirically. But this is then covered in the third section. So what do we actually do in terms of data collection, empirical measurement, and so on? This involves designing the study, the case selection, the sample, the measurements, and so on, compiling the sample, and then going to the field and gathering the data. And finally, once we have these data, we do analyze these data and report them. Again, going back to the specific hypotheses and research questions, which we translated into a research design that's fit to testing and exploring these. And so we now need to capitalize on this measurement that we've done and do exactly those analyses that kind of are already codified in these hypotheses and research questions. And then based on this, we report the study. Now to the feedback loops. The major feedback loop is that once we have our study reported, it says something about the current state of literature. So it may solve some issues, but also highlight new areas where we need more research, so it can provide new motivating ideas, motivating observations, or be just part of this body of literature that can motivate further research. So this is absolutely vital, that every little empirical piece of knowledge is becoming part of the larger body of scientific knowledge in the scientific literature that everybody can use and develop further. But then we also have feedback loops within, and those are mostly to show how the different sections or the different processual steps in a research project tie back to the more initial steps. So as the major outcome of the exploration of ideas, formulation of a research problem, and so on, in designing the study, we always have to go back to what did previous literature say on how you best measure this. right? Or what's conventional way of measuring it? And do we think this is a good way of measuring it, or are there deficits that probably other research hasn't yet pointed out and we pointed out and try to improve it? So you always go back to this, to the literature, to your hypotheses and your research questions when you design the study, so that the study is in a way the perfect response to the call for exploring or gathering more knowledge about this phenomenon. And the same is true when you analyze the data. So when you analyze the data, you need to make sure that you haven't only collected the data, but you also process it in a way that is in line with previous literature, how it handled it, or if you want to deviate from it, like also specifying how you do it and what's better about it, and check if it's really better, and so on. So to make your arguments and the conclusions from your data analysis as convincing as possible, you always need to make sure the match between the design of the study and the analysis of the study with the hypothesis, research questions, and literature is optimized.